For one final time, the final regular season preview show podcast here in the Lawrence County SportsNet, powered by LCAP, Week 9, Game 10 for, well, almost all teams in Lawrence County. We'll get to that in a minute because we have special guest, Eric Thomas, going to join us because it is a special edition of the podcast series delivered by Penn Ohio Bottled Water because we got some huge games going on across Lawrence County. Eric, let's just start with this. Your first year in person of experiencing Lawrence County football, and you're getting some dandy games here to go along over the course of this year. Hope you've enjoyed it.
Yeah, it really have. It's all worked out. At the very tail end of the year, we got the matchups we thought we would get. We started the season off with a really good one, and it's been good football all year. It's been a lot of interesting scoreboard watching, and here we are. We got the biggest game of the season, saved for the last week of the season, just exactly how you want it.
Let's get right into it. The biggest one of the year for sure. Essentially it is the MAC championship game, the Midwestern Athletic Conference in Class 2A, Neshannock hosting Mohawk. It is incredible, Eric, how these two teams have mirrored each other. They both lost Week 0 games on the road and have not lost since. One going through the air mainly, the other one going up in more of a ground and pound game. But these two teams, they know each other well naturally. They're not the biggest fans of each other, to say the very least, but what we do know is that fans on both sides are going to be packing the stands at Bob Ledgy Stadium on Friday.
And what has really impressed me the last couple of weeks, James, is the fact that Neshannock has started to throw the ball more these last 3 weeks, and they've looked their best at passing the ball the last 3 weeks, and they've been the run-heavy team. Mohawk runs the ball really well last week, doesn't have to rely on Jay Roner. Of course, the weather had a lot to do with that, but it took almost all season for us to see Mohawk have to really lean on that running game, and they finally did it. And it's odd how these two teams have gotten to this point in the latter stages of the season by doing the exact opposite thing that we've seen them do the entire year to get to the point they were at before they had to get to the point that they're at now.
Yeah, it is a perfect example of that. Yeah, We've seen Gino Mazzocco, the sophomore quarterback, growing over the course of the season and, getting more and more in the pass game. But you hit the nail on the head with Justin Boston. 40 carries last week. And from the sounds of it, that was kind of just a game plan. They thought they could run the ball. They knew the weather was going to be bad. But he's been a big development. And that whole offensive line as a whole, because Week 0 against Union, they could not do a thing running the football there at Sox Russo Stadium. I think that's been a point of emphasis for Coach McCutcheon and his team to really do more of controlling that offensive and defensive line. And they've done a great job with it, especially in the second half of the year.
If you ask anybody in the state of Pennsylvania who's covered high school football, and you and I have done it for a long time, if you're going to win in the month of November and then ultimately win those first 2 weeks of December now, you've got to run the football. It's as simple as that. You have to have the ability to control a game with your running back. You can still throw. You can still have these high-powered offenses, but you look at some of these teams that we're probably going to see in the state championship game. Imatep can run the football. Aliquippa obviously can run the football. These aren't predictions, by the way. These are just, assuming that the teams that, quote, should get there, get there. McDevitt's got a good running game. They're expected to get there out of District 3. I mean, you just go on and on down to Southern Columbia. What do they do best? They run the football. All these teams that have had all this success and continue to have the success late in the season all can run the football. And it's, from a Mohawk standpoint, listen, I think they're the most impressive team I've seen all season. It's mostly because they have so many different guys that can beat you in a game. It doesn't matter. If you take away Bobby Fadden, Dante Retort has a big game. If you take away both, Blake Logan has a big game. Now Justin Boston has a big game at the right time. They're going to have to, I think, not just in this game, but when they get into these WPIL playoff games, these more finesse teams or teams that love to throw the football are going to have to really, really get down and dirty and have to get physical with teams, control the line of scrimmage. Best way you can do that is if you run the football. That's a good sign for Mohawk last week.
And you mentioned all those weapons, but they still might have the most dynamic weapon of all in a kicker who can boot a 49-yard field goal. We believe it is a Lawrence County record. We're still trying to confirm that officially, but I mean, just what a weapon, not only for obviously field goal attempts, but just for changing field position in a kickoff game every time.
And showed that he could do it in the worst possible conditions last week, too. You and I were sitting outside last week for our game, and, I mean, we weren't that far away from where that kick took place. I mean, it was not the best of conditions to do that. And that's the other thing. they have excellent, both these teams on Friday night, Neshannock and Mohawk, both have good special teams. We haven't had to see the kicking, the field goal unit really. I don't even think Neshannock has attempted a field goal this season, if I'm not mistaken. But when you can throw a guy out there that can kick a 49-yard field goal in those conditions, that's the third facet of a game. You have to be able to win special teams. I've seen teams win state titles on special teams, get to state championship games because they're special teams, even if it's just field position, setting their offense up, or putting a team in position to kick a field goal, punts. I mean, Central Dauphin in 2011 won a state semifinal because they played field position the entire night against North Allegheny. Their punter was obviously the MVP, was really the MVP of that game, and you don't see that too often. If you can do those type of things too, running the football, the special teams, defense obviously is an important thing. But yeah, nobody has that kind of weapon. At least I've seen on this side of the state. I can't really speak for the eastern side anymore, but on this side, haven't seen a kid boot a field goal that long in a long, long time.
Let's talk about defense real quick. Mohawk, especially a bend don't break defense. But I want to talk about the Lancers defense that has been really stout throughout the course of the year. A bunch of defensive touchdowns. You mentioned special teams. Anthony Bonner's got a punt return for a touchdown. Dom Cubelis a pick six, along with Bonner, and even Pat Argero. I want to mention Pat real quick, by the way. Last 4 games, he has 9 rushing touchdowns. Talk about a kid who's flying under the radar. Keep an eye on Pat Argero as the number 2 running back option. But that Lancer defense, that's really been the true key ever since Coach Mazzocco came to the Neshannock program. And by the way, 100 victories now. Congratulations to Coach Mo. He doesn't care about that. He wants to get 101 on Friday. But that Lancer defense is going to be put to the test. They're going to be up for the challenge, though, no question about it.
No, yeah, they will. I mean, 4 times this year they've had 2 picks in a game, so their secondary, their linebacking core is really good. The stat that jumps out to me, teams are only converting 28% on third down against this team. They're 29 of 101 against them this season, and fourth down is a little bit higher, 42%. But, those fourth downs, I mean, that really just kind of depends on down and distance, really how big that 8 that teams have gotten is going to be. But I mean, 28%. So not only are they pounding teams running the football, not only now have they shown that they can throw the football, but they're also getting people off the field too. They haven't had, they've won a couple of 1-point games in back-to-back weeks, but for the most part, they've controlled just about every game that they've played. Their defenses look really good, but they've spread the wealth on defense too. You mentioned a couple guys, but, Ashton Allison, another guy, almost 50 tackles this season. Braden Montgomery, he's had a big year. He's got a couple sacks and fumble recoveries. Everybody seems to share the wealth. Tackles for loss, they have a whole bunch of those defensively, 38 of them this season. They're just solid. They're a solid team. They don't even give up 300 yards a game either. That's the other thing is all these high-powered offenses. Western Beaver, they're going to get tested for sure on Friday night with Mohawks, but Western Beaver, number 1 passing attack WPIL, really not a factor. They still won that game. They still don't give up 300 yards a game, which is, to me, really impressive when you're talking about an age of offense, really where, it's high power, a lot of scoring, a lot of teams throwing the football and getting big chunk yardage and all that. This team's still not giving up 300 yards a game. That's pretty impressive.
Mohawk looking for only their 3rd conference title ever, and it's going to be rough because here's the other big stat. They're at Neshannock, where under Coach Mazzocco, against Lawrence County teams, 29-4 all time. And just that's in any game. At home in the Coach Mazzocco era, 44-6. That's right, just 6 times the Lancers have lost at home in the Coach Mo era. It's going to be a fun one. Glad that we'll be on the call. Eric and I will be out there at Bob Lecce Stadium. And by the way, they're saying come early because they're already planning to be parking people in front of the high school because of the expected traffic for that game. That's one of the games we'll have. The Moan brothers, Lee and Jay, will be on the call up at Glen Pop Johnston Stadium, Frank Bonjavengo Field. Shenango against Laurel in Class 1A Big 7. No, it's not for the crown, but it is just as important because it's a casket game. A win and you're in, lose and you go home style game between the Cats and the Spartans. And I think more than anything, what we're finding about both these teams, Eric, is that they're both peaking at the right time. Laurel, their young team, getting better and better. Shenango getting healthier as the year has gone on. Still not fully healthy, but getting more and more players on that field.
And battle tested too. That's the other thing. Their Big Seven's been pretty good this season. Southside, we saw them last week. Union, Rochester is still in the mix somewhere. But yeah, I think that now is the time of year. Too many coaches don't like to load up their schedule if their conference is going to be tough. I think you do load it up. I think you test yourself, because then when you get down to a situation like these two teams are in on Friday, you've now gone through all that. You've played Union, you've played Southside, you've played Rochester, you've had a couple of other games against other teams outside the conference. You've really put yourself through the ringer. You get down to a tough game. You've already been through all those other tough games. It makes it pretty even for both those sides, but that to me is the importance of your schedule. Sometimes it breaks the way it does as far as who you play when, but certainly if they were playing a South Side, if one of these teams were playing a South Side on Friday night, maybe they want to go undefeated, but maybe it's not as big as it could be because South Side already has everything locked up. Who knows? So I think going through the test of all those other schools now, before and then getting to now is going to be a big factor. Who really can step up and survive that? They've already survived a bunch of things this season.
By the way, real quick, Shenango, the Midgets were in the championship game. They lost to Neshannock over the past weekend. And the Laurel junior high program just capped off an undefeated season with a 35-13 victory over Neshannock. So both these teams in the youth programs have some fun things to look at in the future. Want to look at the now, though, and with this Laurel team especially, kind of similar to Neshannock, could only run it early in the year. The passing game just wasn't there. But Lucas Santini has really improved as a passer. He ends up missing a game with an injury against Northgate, and Jackson Saunders comes right in like nothing happened. I mean, they were splitting time early in the year, and I still think you're going to see a little bit of that maybe throughout the course of this game on Friday, of mixing it up and getting both QBs there behind center.
It's effective. Sometimes you kind of question if you have two quarterbacks, you don't have one, but that old adage. But if you can do it effectively and one guy can be a complete change of pace, I say you do it if you can. And, it's good to hear that about Santini, maybe trusting him a little bit more late in the game. One of these quarterbacks on Friday night is going to have to step up and make a play to win a game. If between these two games that we have on Friday night, somebody's going to have to step up and make a play. Do you have a senior like in Jay Rona who's done it his whole career? You have a young guy in Mazzocco for Neshannock who's still kind of learning his way and getting more and more reps and getting better and better. If you're Laurel, do you trust him more? Can you put the game in his hands if you need to? Maybe they feel comfortable like that now, but one of those guys is going to have to step up and make a play if his team's going to win on Friday.
Colton Carlson's been a nice little addition the second half of the year. Another one of those sophomores, a great sophomore class for the Spartans, catching the ball. But it's going to be behind the big offensive line. Again, Young improving each and every week. Ben Hennon quickly just moving his way up the numbers. He could potentially go over 1,000 yards on the season with I'll call it a standard Spartan running back style game on Friday night for sure. And I think that's where the fun contrast comes in, because on the other side, Shenango has really struggled to run the football over the course of this year, but they've also gone to a secondary, actually a third quarterback. Sam Patton starts the year. He got hurt back in week 2. Haven't seen him since. Sam Myers has done a great job. Turnovers at times have become an issue, but Nico DeSalvo has been a breath of fresh air. The freshman throwing some touchdown passes, running the ball very well. He has kind of been the little wild card, so to speak, over the last couple of weeks. Again, a little bit of a wrinkle and a different form of offense than what they've been seeing earlier on in the season.
Each of these two teams, James, too, are giving up 7 more points than they score. Their stats are about even in terms of scoring. I find that pretty interesting because a lot of times when you look at games in which the stats are even or you expect one thing or another, it's usually a tighter game. And I think we're going to see that on Friday night. I don't necessarily know that our game, I could see our game if somebody gets on a roll, just kind of going one direction. But between these two, they seem pretty even. There's a berth on the line, obviously, so that's an important thing. And, when you think one team does one thing the best, throw all those things out, because typically all those things end up canceling each other out, and you end up getting like a 10-7 style game.
The one wild card might be, and kind of was that way in the college game, Penn State, Ohio State. You have a receiver who can just take over. That could end up being a big key, and you definitely have that in the tight end converted wide receiver in Colton Fedrizzi. He's got a couple of 3 touchdown games on the year. if he can win his matchup at the line of scrimmage, look out, because he is a tough man to bring down.
Well, and that's the thing. You need guys. We just said about Mohawk having different guys. Well, if you have one guy, especially at the single A level, that can make all the difference in the world for your team. I mean, look at, say, Union. We'll get to them in a minute, but look at Union, for instance. I mean, they have the best player on the field just about every single time they step on the field, and Braylon Thomas also plays the most important position. At this level of football, if you have one of those guys that can take charge of a game like he might be able to tomorrow night or Friday night, that's a big difference. The gap, a guy like that separates each other, himself from the rest of the pack at the lower levels. The more you get into like 2A, and then you can kind of have more complete, or you have teams like we're going to see Friday night with Neshannock and Mohawk, that everybody can kind of play a role in it. Then you get into 3A, it's a little bit more diverse. 4A, it's more diverse. 5, 6A, more you get up, the teams obviously have more depth. So that kind of takes away the importance of maybe one guy. But at single A, if you have that one guy that can take charge of the game, that's a big difference.
One final question on this game. Any sort of motivation or any sort of just extra factor knowing that Laurel has won 10 straight times against Shenango? Does that go into anybody's heads either on either the Spartan or Wildcat side?
Yeah, I don't think you can. I think you just have to focus on what's ahead. And that's if you win, you get in the playoffs. So if you win the 11th game against them, or if you win for the first time in 10, it doesn't matter. You're still going to the playoffs if you get on the right side of that equation. That's got to be the important thing. The fact that you get to practice again and play again. And, we know what the brackets are going to be, obviously, until Saturday. You don't know what's going to happen when those brackets, when everybody starts playing in the playoffs, too. I mean, there's nutty. You just have to get in. That's it. You just have to get in. It doesn't matter if you get in 3-0 and 35-0, 35-34. Just get in. And that's got to be the focus of those two teams.
Shenango, if they're in, they could actually be the number 3 seed out of the Big 7 conference, depending on what happens in the other game with Rochester against Southside. Laurel, if they're in, they are guaranteed the 4 seed. And why is that important, though? The 3 and the 4 seed from last year, well, their names were Union and Rochester, the 10 and 14 seed, who made the WPIL semifinals. So, yes, anything, especially the way the 1A football in WPIL country is going right now, anything is possible. And anything's possible here on our Lawrence County SportsNet podcast. We'll take a quick break. Eric Thomas alongside to give us some great insight, and we got more games coming. 3 more to preview when we return here on the Lawrence County SportsNet podcast, delivered by Penn Ohio Bottled Water.
Don't get left out to dry. Call the Penn Ohio Bottled Water Company for the fastest and most efficient bottled water delivery service in the area. Penn Ohio offers bottled water ranging from 16.9-ounce bottles to 5-gallon jugs, perfect for your next event or office water cooler system. Also, don't forget to ask about their custom labeling options. Visit PennOhioBottledWater.com for more information and to get a quote on their delivery services. Whether it's at home, in the office, or on the sidelines, Penn Ohio has you covered.
Thank you again to our good friends at Penn Ohio Bottled Water. They're the reason why we can deliver you all of these great factoids and information week in, week out. They'll continue. We'll try to do a little football playoff podcast once the brackets come out, which are scheduled to come out Saturday morning, or I guess Saturday afternoon, technically, right at noon. Don Rebel on Trib Live will have his annual unveiling, so we'll send out that link once it becomes available. Also need to remind you real quick, the nominations are open now for our October awards for the LCAP Team of the Month and our LGKG Male and Female Athlete of the Month. So make sure you log on to lcsportsnet.com, click awards at the top of the page, and put in your nomination for those player, male and female athlete, and the Team of the Month awards. We'll announce them on one of these podcasts coming up next week. We got 3 more games to look at, and one more that has very important playoff ramifications. Elwood City traveling to Riverside. It's another edition of the huge Rival Cup. 2 schools that are just, I think, it's 3 miles apart. But to get from one school to the other, you have to cross the Connequin Creek 3 different times. It's a funny little factoid, but 2 teams, I mean, you want to talk about 2 teams that absolutely hate each other. This is Man City, Man United. This is Jets, Giants. This is all that in a bag of chips. But it means a little bit more for Elwood City this year, trying to end the second longest drought in WPIL right now. They haven't made it to the playoffs since 2012. A win, and they're in, no questions asked.
Yeah, and they're an interesting team because we saw them against Beaver Falls a couple weeks ago, and they were in that game almost the entire way. And then Beaver Falls, who had all those issues with personnel, kind of took the game over, really dominated the line of scrimmage, put the game away going into the middle part of the fourth quarter. And then they come back last week against the Shannock. And all right, well, maybe they have an upset chance. And the answer to that was pretty quick no, even though that was a game for a little bit too. I still like their personnel. I like the makeup of their offensive line. They really do need to be healthy. They weren't 100% healthy against Beaver Falls when we saw them. Palmer McCain has to get a bunch of touches tonight. Not effective when we saw him against Beaver Falls. He needs to get back to what he was a couple weeks ago when he was leading the WPIL or close to it and leading the conference in rushing. And I think the other thing for Elwood is all the things that have to happen for them to not make it just they're sort of wacky. I mean, you look at the Freedom New Brighton game, and that's a 1-5 team and an 0-6 team in the conference. I mean, they're both eliminated. That can kind of go any way. So you really can't depend on somebody losing to somebody else in that case because you don't know how that game's going to go. That's a 50-50 game all the way. Handle your business. That's the easiest thing you can do. They've got pieces. Smiley's been a good quarterback all season long. I, again, really like their offensive line. They're a sneaky, fun team to watch. And, you know, if they have a chance to get in the playoffs, they might be able to make some noise here and there, but you got to get there first, and they got to handle their business on Friday.
Yeah, it's been fun to see this team progress because a lot of these juniors on a very junior-heavy team, a lot of them starting since their freshman year. And Chris Smiley just set a single-season passing record, and he's about 100 yards away from a career passing record. Paul McCain is over 2,000 rushing yards. He's approaching single-season and career rushing marks as well. So we're going to be talking about these names historically for many, many years down the road. But that's not what they're looking for. They want one win against the team that we hate the most, basically. Can we go get it done? And I think more than anything, too, it's you got to do what they've done the last couple of weeks. Not only hang with the team early, but strike quickly, get a lead, and really leave no doubt right from the get-go against Riverside, who just got their first win of the year last week.
And you can't get complacent either. They might have gotten a touch complacent against Beaver Falls when they were leading, and it sort of seemed like, okay, well, a lot of things aren't on Beaver Falls, side in this game. Maybe we can get this thing going here. I mean, their path is simple: just win. That's it. Just win, and you can get to the playoffs. You have a chance to. I think they haven't had more than 4 wins in a season since 2011 or somewhere back in that time. So, they have a lot of things going for them here and a successful season. So just win. I mean, it's really easier said than done, but it's that simple. Just go win. You got a horse in the backfield, give him his carries. You got a really strong arm quarterback who at times looks like he's really in charge of a lot of things and really can delegate the ball on offense. Your offensive line has been getting better and better. Defense needed to toughen up a little bit in that Beaver Falls game. Again, they were right there in that game at the end of the fourth quarter. They were a couple of points away from tying that game up, went for 2 to try to tie it. That's a good benchmark for me if you're going to ask, because I think that Beaver Falls team's going to end up being pretty good again in these 2A playoffs, depending on draw, obviously. But I think that they can still do some damage with the talent they have. And this Elwood City team is right with them. So if that's a benchmark for me, then I know that they're capable to just go out there and handle their business and get a win.
Our friends at Elwood City Sports will be streaming that one there from Riverside. Again, the Rival Cup. They win. They're the number 5 team and the final team into the playoffs out of the MAC. 2A is very screwy because the MAC gets 5 teams. One of the other conferences gets 5 teams as well. But the third conference only has 7 teams, so they only get one. They get 1 fewer. They get only 4 in from the Century Conference. So the Midwestern and the Allegheny each get 5, only 4 from the Century. So 2 first-round buys. So real quick, looking at that, Beaver Falls, Western Beaver, winners to 3, losers to 4. Elwood City wins, they're the 5. Neshannock and Mohawk are 1-2 or 2-1, depending on what happens there. Real quick, do Neshannock or Mohawk have a case at the number 1 overall seed potentially? You look at Steel Valley is 7-1; they're undefeated in the conference. In theirs, McGuffey is 5-0, but they play Washington, who's had their number in recent years. You can make a great argument that you might have a Lawrence County team as the top seed, or for sure, I'd say number 2 to get a first round bye, right?
I think it really depends on what happens with that McGuffey-Washington game. I think Steel Valley, is probably going to be your number 1 seed if they win. I don't know how you say no. They're the only 2A team in the WPIL ranked in the state. So that's a pretty tall, they're a heavy favorite. To me, if you're going to rank them out of the top 10 teams in the state, they're the only WPIL team in that top 10 according to Penn Live. That to me means that they're going to be a heavy favorite when the tournament comes around. So I think it's going to be very tough for anybody to outdo them as far as the number one seed. But two, yeah, there's a case to be made there. And, I need to see Neshannock in person on Friday to get a better feel for them. I've only watched them, and then we saw their scrimmage at the beginning of the year when we were meeting to go over everything. But I don't know that I want to play either one of those teams. Mm-hmm. So to me, if you're looking at the rest of the 2A bracket, they may not want to play Washington or McGuffey or Steel Valley. I don't think a lot of teams are going to want to play a team that can line up and pound the ball like Neshannock, a quarterback who's getting better, or I'm not sure that anybody outside of Beaver Falls can throw the kind of weapons on the field that Mohawk can. I look at that MAC conference and I see three teams that you probably don't want to play. And then who knows at Western Beaver, they're kind of a wild card because they can throw it everywhere. So if you get them on the right night and they're throwing for 400 yards, you might be in for a long night against them too.
Top two teams will have a bye in the Class 2A tournament. Speaking of byes, Wilmington has a bye, the other 2A team from Lawrence County, as they were not played this week. Expected to be in the playoffs, not official yet until the brackets officially come out over the weekend, but Wilmington expected to be probably a 6 or 7 seed in that Class 2A tournament. Let's go to some other changes in the guard. How about Newcastle finally getting off the snide with that 17-game losing streak gone, a 27-17 victory last week. 3 touchdowns for Malik Jefferson. Now they get to finish off the year on senior night. Malik leading the way with that senior crew against a winless Blackhawk team. Just first off, congrats Coach Rob and congrats Newcastle getting that ugliness off their shoulder in that ridiculously tough Parkway Conference and a chance to end not only with a win, but on a winning streak to end the year.
Okay, so they're not going to go on. They're not going to play any further, but you get 2 wins to close the season out. You can end things on a high note. There's an upbeat in the program at that point. Maybe more kids want to come out and work out early. Maybe more kids want to hit the weight room. It's that old adage that the next season starts the day after this one ends. So, those guys have something to build on. That's going to be the key for them. And can they get this win? And then can they parlay that into a strong start to an off season? That's how you build a good season, by having your off season weight program. Those other guys are going to go everywhere else and play other sports too, for sure. But at the same time, if you can kind of keep that focus and always go back to that point, hey, we won these couple 2 to end the season, and you start getting a little bit more interest in your throwing in the springtime, you start getting more interest in your weight room, you start getting some of your younger players involved in it a little bit earlier. That's how you start building a program. You got to find momentum somewhere. It doesn't matter how you find it, but if you find it at the end of the year and can carry that over to the next season, that's a good start for your program.
And who knows what realignment will bring for next season as well. That Parkway Conference absolutely stacked. You could argue probably 3 of the top 5 teams, not only in the WIL, but possibly in the entire state in Class 4A are coming from that conference. So Newcastle Blackhawk Friday night doesn't mean anything for playoff potential, but means a whole bunch for that senior class there at Newcastle. Well, that wraps up all of the Friday night games that we'll be seeing this weekend. Hold the phone, a Thursday afternoon game. How about that? Thursday, 12:30 kickoff in beautiful Herman, Pennsylvania. Union traveling to the Summit Academy to wrap up their season. Eric, coming off of a tough loss, obviously, Union is lost their chance at the outright conference championship. They technically still have a chance to split it, depending on what Southside does with Rochester. But more than anything, this is a game for Union. Hey, go back, let's execute a couple of things. It's a game that they should win very handily, and get out of there and be done early. And I'd say have an extra day of rest technically going into the first week of playoffs.
Yeah, that's a big key for them, is to have that extra day. Plus, then they have a chance to go scout Friday, too. You don't know who, obviously, you're going to see. It's kind of a crapshoot as to where you land. But, they have a chance to maybe go see a team that they haven't seen yet this season to kind of help them out. Look, they got a first-hand taste of what a championship team looks like last Friday. They are a championship team right now, and I said this to you last Friday during our game, that they're still the champs until somebody beats them. But that team that we saw last week on their field, Southside, looks like they want to beat them again and win that title. And that, if that happens to my team, that leaves a sour taste in my mouth. And I don't care who the opponent is the next week. You're right. I'm going in there and I'm letting it fly, and I'm getting off that field and I'm winning by. I might not go. I can't go for three. I went for two because I can't go for three, kind of thing. Like I think that has a chance to. They need a get-right game, just not because of the loss, but they need a get-right game to feel better about where they are going to the playoffs, and I think they're going to get it.
Just glad they can have that game. Summit Academy's game last week against Laurel was actually called just before halftime. Summit Academy, there was a scuffle on the sideline, and honestly, big kudos to the Summit Academy players, because a lot of them left the bench. Yes, that's a no-no, but they left the bench not to join a fight, but to break it up. They got a lot of pats in the back and applause from their coaching staff to make sure nothing worse broke out. However, those are all ejections. There was worry that they would have enough players to even compete this week. Coach Nee informed me, yep, they definitely have enough to be able to play. They said they want to play, so Union's going to make the travel down. And the reason it is on Thursday, by the way, back in February or March, Union the whole WIL was basically informed they wanted to make sure, like they did last year, they want the brackets to be announced on Saturday, so they didn't want any meaningful Saturday games. Feels like Union's the only one that got the memo, because the game got moved from Saturday to Thursday. Kudos to Summit and to Union to make that a possibility, but that Western Beaver against Beaver Falls game we talked about, that's still Saturday after the brackets are going to be announced. Bishop Canterbury, I know, has a night game after the brackets are announced. There's at least one other game. I don't think that one had playoff implications, though. Both teams out of the postseason. However, just again, hats off to them getting that game done, taken care of plenty ahead of time. And it could be a historic game as well, just 110 yards away for Braylon Thomas to do something that has not been done very often, Eric, in WPIAL.
Yeah, 1,000. In a regular season, you pointed out to me last week, he did it in the entire season last year in the run-up to the state championship game. But to do that in a single season, a regular season, at the single A level is just, that's impressive. I mean, again, he's the best player to me on the field. Doesn't matter who they play or who they see. I think he's the best player on the field whenever he's out there. Deserves this honor if he gets it. I can't imagine he's going to be on the field for much of this game. I don't think a lot of these starters are going to be on the field for much of this game. And I want to see, and this is going to sound punny, I want to see some fight out of Summit Academy. I want to see them come out and, hey, you're on our field. You're not getting this. We're going to make you work for this. We're going to make you earn it. And I think in a way, like, if Union can go out there and they could blow this team out and just get off the field and get on the bus and go back home, they'd feel better about themselves. But I also think that they kind of want a bit of a test too. I think they need to sort of refocus themselves. And if they get a little bit of pushback early in this game, don't be surprised. And then if they just take control. But I want to see Summit come out there, make them earn everything that they have to earn on Friday or Thursday. I don't want to see them have to extend and play the whole game just for their sake, just to stay healthy and all that. But I want to see them get tested a little bit, and how they respond to that might go a long way to how they respond to these playoffs.
Eric will get his first taste of Herman, Pennsylvania. He's going to help produce for us. Jay and Lee Moan will be on the call there. Again, it's a historic matchup for the first, as far as we're aware, the first WPIAL game on a Thursday afternoon. So we'll gladly be there for the call on that one. So we got 3 of the 5 county games on the air, and we'll have video links for the other 2 contests as well for you coming up on Thursday afternoon, and then the other 4 on Friday night. And that's going to wrap up our final, very lengthy but very informative. We hope you guys have all enjoyed it, this LC SportsNet podcast here for the Week 9 preview. Eric, thanks for joining us. We're going to have to do some more of these come playoff time for sure.
Yep, definitely looking forward to it, and looking forward to that game on Friday night. We'll see you there.
Absolutely. We appreciate that. Make sure you stay tuned. We'll have the updates on the volleyball playoffs coming up here in the next couple of days as well. Quarterfinals going on Saturday afternoon. Thanks again to Penn Ohio Bottled Water for delivering our podcast each and every week. Thanks to Eric Thomas for joining us. And I'm James Dotson. Make sure you stay tuned bunch of great games this week and going into the postseason coming up next week, all here on the Lawrence County SportsNet, powered by LCAP.